just slammed his head into the door on the way out. For the Ferguson press corps, which would eventually swell from dozens of daily reporters for local St. Louis outlets and regional reporters for national shops, into hundreds of journalists, including ones from dozens of foreign countries, the McDonald's on West Florissant Avenue became the newsroom. Not that we all had much choice in the matter. The modest-sized dining room with a single television on the wall and movie rental box in the back corner was the only spot within walking distance of the street where Mike Brown had been killed that had all three of the essentials required by a reporter on the road: bathrooms, Wi-Fi, and electrical outlets. Because the protests were largely, in those first days, organic, and not called by any specific group or set of activists, they were also unpredictable. Some of the demonstrators came to demand an immediate indictment of the officer. Others wanted officials to explain what happened that day, to tell them who this officer was and why this young man was dead. Scores more stood on sidewalks and street corners, unable to articulate their exact demands. They just knew they wanted justice. Covering Ferguson directly after the killing of Mike Brown involved hours on the streets, with clusters of reporters staked out from the early afternoon into the early hours of the morning. At any point, a resident or a group of them could begin a heated argument with the police or a reporter. A demonstration that had for hours consisted of a group of local women standing and chanting on a street corner would suddenly evolve into a chain of bodies blocking traffic, or an impromptu march to the other side of town. And as the summer sun gave way to night, the prospect of violence, both the bricks and bottles of a would-be rioter and the batons and rubber bullets of local police officers, increased exponentially. As long as the protesters and the police remained on the streets, reporters had to as well. Not since the Boston Marathon bombings a year and a half earlier had I covered a story for which there was such intense, immediate appetite. Earlier on the day I was arrested, I tweeted digital video and photo updates from the spot where Brown had been shot and killed, from the burned-out shell of the Quick Trip gas station torched in the first night of rioting, of the peaceful crowds of church ladies who gathered that afternoon on West Florissant, a major thoroughfare not far from where the shooting occurred that played host to most of the demonstrations, as well as the heavily armored police vehicles that responded to monitor them. For years, updates like these would have been phoned into the newsroom, with a reporter describing the unfolding situation sentence by sentence as a rewrite guy molded the news into already existing articles. Now, they could be published instantaneously. But an iPhone battery only lasts for so long, so with the deadline for the story I was writing for tomorrow's newspaper looming, I left the protest and made the 3-block trek to the McDonald's, bought a Big Mac and fries, from across the room greeted Ryan, and holed up in the corner of the dining room to let my phone charge. It wasn't long later when the riot gear-clad officers entered, suggesting we all leave because, with protests still simmering outside, things could get dangerous once the sun went down. Then, when it became clear that we were happy to wait and see how things developed outside, they changed their tune. Now the officers were demanding we leave. I was annoyed, but covering protests and demonstrations often means taking direction that doesn't make sense from police officers who aren't quite concerned with your convenience, much less your ability to do your job. I kept my phone, which was recording video, propped up in one hand as I shoved my notebooks into the same fading green backpack I've carried since my senior year of high school. As I packed, I attempted to ask the officer, now standing in my face, if I'd be able to move my rental car from the parking lot. He didn't, he said, have time for questions. Once I'd finished packing, I walked past him, making my way toward the door. As I walked to the exit, the officers decided that all this had taken too long. It had been about 1 minute since they had first told me to leave when I heard one officer say, "Okay, let's take him," and then felt their arms grab me from behind. Now I stood on my tiptoes, insisting to Officer Friendly that I was, in fact, complying with his demands, even though he was insisting that I wasn't. "My hands are behind my back," I shouted to the uniformed men, now pressing their weight into me as they ran their gloved hands down my front and back pants pockets.